Good afternoon, everybody. Wow, these lights are bright. Thank you so much for coming and hearing this session. I have got a lot of slides. I've got a lot of words that I need to pack into 30 minutes. So forgive me, I'm going to go at speed. But luckily, even if English isn't your first language, all of you are incredible at speaking English. So that's my benefit. So my name is Sian Sutherland. I am co-founder of A Plastic Planet, also Plastic Free, which is a global solutions platform that sits on plasticfree.com, and then also the Plastic Health Council that I will tell you a little bit more about. I'm going to talk about these 6 words. I'm going to talk about truth, consequence, risk, opportunity, hope, because as entrepreneurs, and many of you I know are entrepreneurs, we have to have hope, and also legacy. Because any of you who are in the finance world, I think what you're looking for here is how can you use your money for good? How can you use your money for impact? But before I do that, by the way, I didn't see my slides here. I don't know if I meant to, but just so you know, I don't. Before I do that, I want to pull back. And has anybody seen the images coming out of the James Webb Telescope? Anyone seen them? Unbelievable images showing us 1,000 times further into space than we have ever been able to see before. So what you're looking at here are called the pillars of creation. This is where stars are born. But what is amazing is as we pull out and then we look back at this, the most famous image of planet Earth called Earthrise, that this image shows us the rarity of this extraordinary little blue and green marble that hangs suspended in the inky blackness of outer space. And the fact that it is the only livable planet that we are ever going to have. So what are we doing to it? And we know that this beautiful little jewel that we live on is in crisis, and many of the talks today have been talking about the crisis, the polycrisis that we're living in, and we know that it is on fire. And of course, you know, we're here in Barcelona, and we have witnessed only a few days ago the devastation happening in Valencia, so it feels very much at home. These are our neighbors. These are your neighbors. So it's very important for us to recognize this extraordinary volume of extreme weather events that are happening. When I first used to use this slide, it was in 2022, I used to talk about how in 2022 we witnessed 7 once in 1,000 years extreme weather events. In only 1 year, that has shot up to 10. We already know that it's going to exceed that in 2024, and so on. So I'm here today really to talk to you about this. Why is plastic even important? Why aren't we worried a lot more about perhaps carbon? We're absolutely obsessed by carbon counting. It's something that we can physically measure, that we can offset against. So why is plastic important? I hear this all the time. Surely, Sian, we can fix the plastic crisis a bit further down the road. But right now, it's all about emissions. And what I want to present to you is this idea of plastic being at the very center, the gateway to our polycrisis. And I don't know if you can see some of the words here of obviously conflict, biodiversity loss, hyperconsumption, deceit. We all know about the lies of the fossil fuel industry. The plastics industry, exactly the same deceit and lies. Inequality and exploitation. Where do we send our waste? In the UK, we still send 60% of our waste to other countries, non-OECD countries who have no way to deal with it. Human rights. We work with people like the Descendants Project, who in Louisiana live on the edge of the huge fracking and the polymer manufacturing facilities, with 11 times the incidence of cancer compared to the rest of the US. So it's a human rights issue as well. And of course, it is intrinsically connected to the climate crisis, because plastic is solid climate crisis. It is that gateway to everything. In fact, if you were to measure it as a country, just its primary emissions make it the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. And then we look at, if we didn't care about the gas emissions, if we didn't care about the carbon impact, let's think about the other thing that is causing the climate crisis, and that, of course, is hyperconsumption. What was the one material that the invention of which allowed us to ramp up to these giddy heights of hyperconsumption, where we can make things so cheaply, so easily, that we can use it once and chuck it in a bin and imagine that some mythical, magical recycling fairy is going to make something useful out of it, when we know recycling is a myth. It is a placebo pill. It is a chimera. It is not happening. It will never happen. And it has been invented by the fossil fuel industry, aka big plastic, in order to allow pumping it out at source. This year alone, look at the numbers. 600 billion plastic bottles every single year. And please let us not think that making polyester out of PET bottles is in any way circular. And then what? Back in the bin? Back in the export truck to some small village market in Ghana? This is never going to be the answer. So 600 billion plastic bottles every single year. It goes halfway to the sun. Imagine how many times we've been to the sun and back and the sun and back. We look at things like 1 trillion plastic sachets, 16 times to the moon, every single year, invented by Unilever in order to grow those bigger markets, as we know, sending it to places like Indonesia. I'm sure you've all been to Thailand. You've seen those strings, reams and reams of these little plastic sachets that we know will never be recycled, completely unrecyclable, but also are created to just develop these markets, knowing that we will also destroy their environment, and in many ways, their source of income, because we're polluting their rivers. 1 million bags a minute, every single minute. Over 60 countries have banned the plastic bag. If you go to Rwanda, it's a $37,000 fine for having a plastic bag. There's a black market for plastic bags there, or 4 years in prison. And yet here in the UK, it's like, what is the pain point of, is it 10p, is it 15p, for us not to take yet another disposable bag? So we invent these things called bags for life. And unfortunately, the bags for life that are never counted when we look at how many bags we're using, those are not included because they're not considered single use. We use more plastic in the UK now than we have ever used for the trillions of plastic bags that we used to create. Every UK household has over 57, on average, 57 bags for life at home. I know, I've got half of them in my house. I'm sure we all do. So none of this is working, and the plastics industry is on track to treble production by 2040. And then I want to talk about health, because for me, in the work that we do at A Plastic Planet, and particularly the Plastic Health Council, human health is the Achilles heel of the plastics industry. We are so used to seeing plastic that you almost think that it exists as a material in its own right. Plastic is a mixture of chemicals, many of which are toxic. We use 16,000 chemicals to make plastic. In fact, the number is vastly more than that, but we don't even know the names of the 100,000 chemicals that scientists reckon are actually used within plastic. But of those 16,000, not only are 4,000 tested for human safety, only 4,000, but the majority of those are considered toxic for human interaction, for human impact. They're considered toxic. Only 6% of those 16,000 chemicals are globally regulated. So somehow, in a hyper-regulated world, this one material has escaped global regulation, and we need to ask why. This fact shocks me every time I look at it. We register a new chemical substance every 1.4 minutes. We are very, very good at wearing hazmat gear, being in a lab, creating chemicals, and then pumping it out into the environment. Where do we think these chemicals go? Where do we think they end up? Well, here's where some of them end up. 287 chemicals found in fetal cord blood, so feeding our unborn babies. We're already finding plastic in unborn babies' brains. New study came out recently, 0.5% of the weight of an adult brain is now plastic. Do we think that this can possibly be a good thing? Heart attacks, strokes, the physical microplastics and nanoplastics starting to store up close to our hearts, encouraging strokes, the incidence of heart failures. BPA, we know, highly toxic for us, already banned in many parts of the EU. Soon we hope to be globally banned. PCBs, dioxins, all of these things, flame retardants, things that we don't even think of as being plastic. We think of plastic as maybe clothing, polyester, maybe it's packaging, it's everywhere. This floor is plastic. The laminate on this wood is plastic. The carpet that you're sitting on there, I can guarantee you there's plastic in that. So that's why there is not an inch of our planet, from the deep ice in the Antarctic to 6 miles down in the Mariana Trench, that we haven't infected with this incredible but toxic and indestructible material that's plastic. One of the biggest media hits we had around plastic was a couple of months ago. I don't know if anyone saw the headline about plastic particles being found in testicles, in male testicles, and it was unbelievable. It was suddenly like, whoa, hang on a minute. I understand it's in breast milk. I understand it's in unborn babies' brains, but now you're telling me I've got plastic in my balls? And this is a major problem. Suddenly it got all the media headlines. So now we realize that actually perhaps we should focus a little bit more on the impact on men rather than women, and the incidence of breast cancer and unborn babies, and obviously the increase in autism in boys that is really ramping up now. Perhaps we should focus more on the men. So this stat is really interesting to me because male fertility has declined 53%. The scientists reckon by 2047, men will not be able to reproduce in the old-fashioned way. Often, when I'm talking to a crowd like this, I will say, does anybody have any friend who is using IVF to conceive right now? And if you do, will you put your hand up if you know anybody who is using IVF? When I had my sons, I knew one person. And now, any time I ask that question, the majority of the audience will put their hand up. This is not normal. This is not how we are meant to procreate. So we need to start really looking at the chemicals that we're using. And then, of course, we need to look at, if this is impacting us, what is it doing to every other living thing on the planet? So we look at biodiversity loss. And some terrifying stats here of just how far we have pushed nature to the brink. Already, we have lost 90%. Here we are in Barcelona, with this incredible view looking at the ocean. We have lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. We've lost 80% of the winged insects. Do you remember when you used to drive down a motorway and at the end you'd have to clean your windscreen because of all those bugs that are splattered on your windscreen? That doesn't happen anymore. This is why. Do you know the bumblebee has lost 2/3 of its sense of smell because of chemical pollution? 2/3 of its sense of smell, which actually means it cannot find the flowers in order to pollinate. So we really need to explore what we are doing right now. 50% of the phytoplankton, the biggest migration on the planet, happens every 24 hours, where the phytoplankton rise to the surface and they take in the carbon emissions and they bring them down and they embed them in the ocean bed. We've lost 50% of the phytoplankton. So this vital link in the carbon cycle we are destroying. And again, by 2050, the scientists reckon, job complete, we will have destroyed life in the ocean. We're nearly at 2025. This feels scarily tangible to us. So what do we need to do? I am an entrepreneur. I am the most unlikely eco-warrior you will ever meet. I got involved in the plastic space some 9 years ago and had my own personal epiphany as a massive plastic sinner, let me tell you. And I've co-founded this organization with this simple goal, to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap. And really, we focus on 3 ways of doing that, in 3 very simple words. And let me tell you, they are nothing to do with beach cleans. They are nothing to do with the consumer having any responsibility for this. I pose the question, why is it legal to sell you the wrong thing when we know what we know now? I think people simply buy what they're sold. We need to sell people something different. Industry have a job to do that. And of course, governments have a job to mandate that industry do that faster. So the first of those words is, for me, probably the most terrifying word for industry and governments, and that is risk. And now we know what we know, and how, particularly around the Achilles heel of plastic and the impact on human health, we really need to consider that contingent liability that industries should be reporting on their balance sheet. I was at the negotiating sessions of the UN Global Plastics Treaty in Ottawa a few months ago, and we were doing an event, just an official side event with the health scientists, making sure the impact on human health was really heard by the negotiating countries. And I was standing next to it the night before these drinks. I was standing next to somebody. I won't drop him in it by mentioning his name, but very senior guy at a big confectionery brand who also make pet food. And I said to him, hey, we're having an event tomorrow. You might want to come. And it's going to be about the incidence of cancer and the fact that microplastics in the blood, when they encounter cancer tumors, those tumors metastasize faster. You might be really interested in hearing about it. And he said, oh, I can't come. I said, oh, that's sad. Well, you've got something else on. What are you up to? He said, no, I can't come, because if I come, we can never again say that we didn't know. And that was terrifying to me. That told me everything about where industry is right now. And if I have one criticism of this amazing couple of days with all of you good people, it's where is industry? Where are the policymakers? Where are the people that are actually going to create the laws to make your jobs 10 times easier? Because it isn't about the fledgling founders, it's also about big industry who are putting their fingers in their ears and pretending that they don't know. And that's why risk is so important to us. I don't know if anybody saw this, but when I was in New York Climate Week, I was at NYU at a big event, massively depressing, all about the impact. It was all the scientists talking about the impact on human health. But Rob Bonta, who is the Attorney General of California, he stood first and declared that they were suing Exxon, that the state of California was suing ExxonMobil, not for fossil fuels, but for plastic. This is the first time this has ever happened. And the way he spoke about it, it's probably worth going on YouTube, because I was amazed to have somebody at his level be so informed on the real picture of plastic. Everything that I've just talked to you about, he knew it, he nailed it in his opening speech. And then the good news is that there are 9 other states that are following the state of California now. Because it's easy to think, well, California, they're a little bit hippy-dippy. Of course they're going to sue Exxon. But now there's more unusual states that are stepping forward to sue them. Because what we know, it's too hard for industry to change alone. And we work a lot with industry. As an entrepreneur, I don't believe in blaming industry. I believe in taking solutions to industry and helping them change. And every single voluntary pact, pledge, pact on plastic, every commitment, starting with Unilever, all of them are failing. And why is that? Why is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Plastics Pact failing? Why is every single initiative failing? Because you cannot do it alone. There is no way that one industry can change this. They cannot change this level playing field. They cannot wean themselves from this incredible, highly subsidized material. It's too hard. Their entire infrastructure is based on plastic. So if voluntary doesn't work, we know we need this. We need policy. So we presented a 10-year thriving post-plastic economy roadmap at the Labour Party conference in the UK. As you know, they're now in power in the UK, so we have a little modicum of hope that perhaps with the new government we can make things happen, because it is only by bans that you will actually foster innovation. Because it is when you give business certainty that they will invest. And right now, if I were running a big CPG, I would really think, well, maybe I'll just wait and see what's going to happen. Who's going to jump first? Because if there are no laws and there is no onerous taxation, and the plastic tax generally is an out-and-out fail, it's just considered a cost of doing business, none of that is going to give certainty to business. We need laws, we need policy, because when you give business certainty, a great example for me, super stupid one perhaps, try and find a plastic fork in London today. Try and find a plastic fork in most of the EU. You won't, because we banned them. Are we eating with our fingers? No. We innovated because we gave lead time to industry. We told them a ban was coming. So unfortunately, much as we love to live in a libertarian society, we have to ban things because it's too hard to do it without policy going your way. And if we create that innovation vacuum, it will be unbelievable what we see. I think at the moment we're a little stuck with innovation. We're a little stuck in thinking, so we know the materials that we know and love. How can we recreate materials that look like them? And for me, it's a bit like you're vegetarian and all you want is a vegetarian sausage. And why can't we just have a new thing? What are the materials that we haven't even dreamed of inventing yet? And this is where that whole thing of the pillars of creation and really pulling out and thinking bigger and creating policy around that is what we have to do. Because it is the innovators that are going to change the future. Because much as I have labored a little long than I ever normally like to do on the problem, we have to only focus on solutions. All that matters now are solutions. I'm going to pose perhaps a radical thought to you all, which is instead of thinking of the plastic crisis as a crisis, let's think of it as a gift. Because it is that canary in the coal mine. It is that badoof, that fossil fuel defibrillator moment that is going to wake us all up to rethink not just the materials that we use and what true circularity is, but also to wake us up to thinking differently about systems. Why is it okay for us to use 1.7 planets worth of natural resource every single year, stealing the resource from our children's future, using it today and calling it GDP? This has to stop. So what I love is this thought of maybe plastic, because it's so tangible. I don't know, carbon. I can't see it, I can't feel it, I can't touch it. How can I impact it? But plastic? I bet every single one of us here feels a little bit guilty every time we fill our recycling bins, knowing the bullshit of recycling, it's really going nowhere. So it's something that is so physical, it's so recent, and it's so fixable. So let's think of it as this amazing defibrillator, this extraordinary moment where we can rethink how we live. So I'm going to show you a few examples. I'm moving into hope and opportunity now. So I'm going to show you a few examples that I think are really extraordinary. And I just want to highlight to everybody that immediately after this session, some of these solutionists are going to be with me in the speakeasy room. So I would love any of you to come along. And please, let's continue this conversation about what are the materials of the future, the systems of the future going to look like. And the first one I want to show you is a project that's coming out of the UK, and it's called Reposit. Because absolutely, single use is a massive issue for us. It is the most, as they say at UNIP, it's the most problematic for the planet. So this is how we shop right now. And when you go into any of your Boots and your Douglases and your Walmarts, and you have a look at it, it's like Jurassic Park. It's just aisle after aisle of this colored plastic, like no one's got the memo post-COVID that we should be thinking differently now. So this is our shopping reality now. Imagine if it looked like this. And this is clearly just a very pony little mock-up. But imagine what a very good designer could do. But imagine if our world instead was this, where we created this umbrella collective that was responsible for collecting common, standardized componentry shared by competitive brands and businesses and retailers, that was responsible for the washing and the redistribution, where if you were L'Oreal or if you were P&G or if you were Unilever, then your 250 ml bottle of shampoo was the same. Because what we buy as shoppers, we don't buy the package that you then make my problem, my guilt. I'm buying the stuff inside. I'm totally happy if it looks like this. In fact, that is an upscale for me. So that's Reposit. And I'm sad to say, after 3 years of trying to make this happen and trialing in the UK, trying to get the big brands on board, it's actually going to launch at scale with competitive brands across one massive state in Canada first. But at least we can prove the model. And if we can prove the model using Unilever and P&G and all of these big guys, then we've got something that we can scale from. This statement I came on the other day, and it just struck me. 55% of global GDP is moderately or highly dependent on nature. And I challenge PwC to show me one business, one balance sheet that can have a thriving business on a dying planet. What is that number, 55%? What is the 45% doing? What, are they in tech? Where do you think the energy is going to come from? It's such a nonsensical, and this to me is the problem that we have with a lot of the big consulting firms. This is paying probably hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce a report that makes you think, well, I'm not going to back those then because nature's dying. I'm going to try and find the 45% that of course depend on nature. It's completely ridiculous. We have to stop this kind of narrative because everything must regenerate nature now. It's the only thing that matters. Stop thinking about offsets. If what you are doing is less bad, it's not good enough. We have to focus on regenerating nature. Many of you will have seen this little illustration. And we all know, linear economy, we talk about the recycling economy, and for many materials, recycling works. So I'm not down on recycling. Paper, molded fiber, metal, glass, all of those things, great. Fill your boots and recycle them. Just do not bother thinking that plastic recycling is ever going to happen at scale. But the problem with the circular economy that we currently talk about, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to lay a little bit of the blame at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation here, is that there's still a bin. And why is that? It's because of this. Because what we do as humans is we take ingredients from nature and we treat them and we toxify them. So we borrow nutrients from nature that are designed for the next stage of growth in nature. We borrow them, but then we toxify them. So when we give them back, as we give everything back, we give them back as toxic waste. And this is the problem. So I want to pose a different way of thinking about true circularity, and it's this. Imagine if we could take the nutrients from nature, we could borrow them, and we keep them clean, that we don't toxify them, so that they can go back to nature as nutrients, because that is circular. There is no such thing as the circular economy. The only thing that is circular is nature. There is no waste in nature. Everything becomes the next stage of growth, and nature is binary. Everything we give nature is either a poison, a toxin, or it is a nutrient, ready for it to use for the next stage of growth. So this world of less bad material, and a lot of bioplastics, I'm afraid, fit into that, nature still won't recognize. So we have to leapfrog the less bad, and we have to go straight into things that are truly nutrient-based. And of course, as an entrepreneur, I'm always excited about where the opportunity lies. So I want to whistle you through 2 or 3 amazing examples of nutrient-based materials that fit into the true cycle, the true circle of nature. And the first one is NFW, Natural Fiber Welding, who yesterday in South Africa were a finalist, one of 5 up for the Earthshot Prize, which is an amazing achievement. And what I love about what they're doing, it isn't just a material swap. It's not just like, okay, instead of a plastic liner, we can use a seaweed liner. They have created an entire system of how they can change everything by using nature's larder as nutrients. Here's some of the brands that they work with. They've been at this coalface for 10 years. Really, they're the godfather of all the nutrient materials that many of the fledgling brands, maybe brands that you are, businesses that you are investing in, these are the people that they aspire to be, because they're out there in the market, they are scaling, and they are ready to catapult to really change the system and challenge plastic and the fossil fuel industry. This, for example, is a sneaker. So this sneaker is so healthy, you could chop it up and you could eat it. It wouldn't be tasty, but you could eat it. You can definitely chop it up and plow it straight into the soil. It doesn't need any kind of nonsensical recycling system that doesn't exist. When we talk about industrial composting, there is no industrial composting that is waiting for the sneaker to, some of the 50 billion sneakers that are made every single year to hit their doors. The other one is Shellworks, and I love this company because they have been really, again, at that coalface of trying to push against plastic, reinvent the very origins of where we make things, and what they're using is microbes. And again, they are now introducing things at scale. Some of you may know a brand called Wild. They do a refillable deodorant. They're about to launch in Tesco's, which is the big supermarket chain from the UK. So then we're proving they can scale. They can do it at a viable price point. And the other thing I love is, of course, it fits into existing production lines. So this is a drop-in solution using fermented microbes that behave like plastic, but actually disintegrate like this. So this is Shellworks after a number of weeks that is just simply within a home composting. It's not needing any kind of industrial. So that is Vivabir that, as you can see, looks and feels like plastic, but isn't. This is BioFluff, and I think we've got Nikolai after me, so I'm going to be bigging him up with something that he's doing at Gani, because this is taking, how everybody's suddenly, we can't wear real fur anymore, so everybody is wearing synthetic fur, which is shocking and terrible for us. So they instead are creating something that is made out of things like hemp. And Savion is their solution. So they are replacing all of these synthetic things like plush. Imagine all the teddy bears that we're giving our kids that are just made out of plastic. We're inhaling all those microfibers. So this is what they're doing, is replacing it with these fully nutrient, natural alternatives. Ripax, and I'm very, very pleased to say that Alvin Lin, who is the founder of Ripax, is here with us today, and he's going to be in the solutions session with me in a moment, come all the way from Singapore. They make all the molded fiber packaging for Apple. So you can imagine they know about scale. They know about quality. They know about what an aesthetic needs to look like for it to be aspirational for all of us. And their next problem that they're trying to eradicate is some of those 600 billion plastic bottles every year. So we are really proud to be working with Ripax on their new launch next year, which is going to scale very fast. So you will hear a lot more about them, I'm sure. But do come to the solution session in the speakeasy and meet Alvin and find out more. And one of the things I love about them is that they're sourcing locally. This is not about shipping bottles around the world. We have to stop doing that. How can we use agri-waste at the point of where we're manufacturing that particular product, use the local agri-waste so that we can manufacture locally? Because what we grow in Singapore is very different to what we grow in Boston. I'm coming. My last one that I'm going to show you is this, which is Sparksel. And very rarely do we think about pigment. And Sparksel are using cellulose to replace all the pigment. And super excitingly for me, they can replace the sequins in my sneakers with cellulose, edible cellulose. They can also replace all the mica that we use in color cosmetics. And anyone who uses any color knows that mica, a terrible supply chain, very fossil fuel based around it as well. And imagine if we could simply replace that. So this is the mantra that we all need to adopt. You cannot end well if you don't start well. There is nothing circular about that. And you cannot end well if you don't stay clean. And my message to all of you is this. Stop thinking the future is just going to happen. It doesn't. We create the future. We are so much more in control of the future than we ever thought. And I hate to say this with finance people in the room, but it is not going to come from bankers. It's going to come from business, it's going to come from science, it's going to come from creativity. And what we need to do is put the money in the right place, but we need to do it fast. Because we are still talking, we are still philosophizing, we're theorizing, we have to move to action tanks now. Because I think yesterday, what happened in America told us one thing. They may be voting for the wrong kind of change, but people are voting for change. Because the status quo does not suit them. And this change, this tipping point that we are on right now is going to happen so much faster than we could ever imagine. And I'm ending on legacy. Because what we do today, what you do in the next 2 or 3 years is not just going to impact you, your kids' kids. It's going to impact that massive blue circle of the unborn generations. Never in the history of mankind has it been so important and so impactful that we make the right decisions right now. My final line is this. So I just love this line from Arundel Roy. On a quiet, another day is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And sometimes we need that level of hope. We need to recognize that if we protect nature, nature will protect us. So please, join me in the plastic fight. Recognize it is the gateway to so much else. And come and join us in the speakeasy to talk further. Thank you.